GM. Welcome to the bull market. Is this a trap? Is it a bear market champagne? Is this time different? I don't know. So Avril, you said you don't really trade anymore. So you're very much in the bear market mindset, which I think we've all been in, like the last going on at least like a year, probably closer to 2-3 years now, closer to 2 years, right? So that bear market mindset is very much a builder's mindset. And coming from the modular ecosystem over at Cosmos, we started to see a lot more like interop emerge out of the woodwork between EVM and Cosmos. There are even some projects working on IBC that connects EVM and Cosmos now. So diving right into this narrative around the modularity, right, and the modular building and the modular ecosystem as we know it in the world of app chains, like what is the current state that you see out there on Cosmos and Ethereum interoperability?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's a few layers to it. Technically the two already are connected and interoperable via like solutions like Axelar and Wormhole. I think the 𝗵𝗂𝘂𝗁𝗏 bridge is, which we launched with 𝗨𝗏𝗏, I think like last month in September, to bring 𝗵𝗂𝘂𝗁𝗏 into the Cosmos ecosystem, is a good example of that, because we're actively working with like Axelar, Wormhole, and 𝗨𝗏𝗏 in order to basically extend the bridge functionality to include like Russian governance, so that 𝗨𝗏𝗏's like DAO smart contracts on Ethereum would be able to control the bridge contracts on Neutron as well. So this is like something that's like today already kind of the case, but you're right in that like the more perhaps like long-term vision of like IBC to Ethereum, IBC to everywhere basically is still very much like being worked on. There's like a lot of technical complexities around the like non-standard IBC implementations, because like in Cosmos you have this flexibility of basically baking IBC, which relies on like client, which are like basically we verify the other chain's state, let's say like their next blocks directly in our blockchains in order to ensure that the bridge is secure before any message gets executed. That's something that's like tremendous from a security perspective, but it's also like extremely resource intensive basically. And so that's not something that's easy to run in a simple smart contract in a constrained environment like the EVM, for example. And so there's definitely challenges, but there's also a number of teams like Succinct and others that are working on like proof of consensus, like light clients that have like ZK light clients that basically do most of the computation off chain and then submit a proof that it was done like properly on Ethereum and else, right? So you have, I think, a first wave of projects like Union, Composable, Polymer, and a few others that are working on like creating hubs that would serve as an intermediary between most Cosmos chains and Ethereum, but already have these kind of like IBC connections on both sides, which I think is like a really great first step. But then I think the end game is really like point-to-point connection between Ethereum and any other chain, basically, with something like IBC. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this rolls out. But I do think that like I think Tarun, like, who is it? Is it no? I don't think it's Tarun. He's from Eigenlayer, I think, who has this like very nice like phrase of like, Ethereum is the largest Cosmos chain. I think that's a super interesting way to frame it, basically, because I think that's where we're headed.
Very cool. That is it's a very modular way to think about it, because there are so many chains and the interoperability comes from the rest of this like inter-blockchain communication protocol. And that is the hub that connects all of these spokes. And you can almost think of Ethereum as a spoke that connects to the rest of these Cosmos app chains through the interoperability solutions of IBC and the rest of the Cosmos hub. So I think that's a really vibrant picture to paint. of Ethereum as the largest Cosmos chain. I think that's a fun way to look at it. So I'd like to dig a bit deeper into the partnership that you have with Axelar and Wormhole and how that integration works for bringing staked ETH over to Cosmos. We recently did a video on Axelar and Squid. Squid router handles the sequential transactions, and Axelar handles the cross-chain bridging part of that. And for anyone who hasn't watched that, I suggest go check it out. So you mentioned you also work with Axelar. I imagine for the cross-chain nature of some of those, of the transfer between Ethereum and Cosmos. Could you unpack a little bit what that integration means for each of the components? Like, what does Axelar do?
Sure.
What does Wormhole do? And then what does Neutron do?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, the current state of the bridge is that it mostly relies on Axelar, as well as a few custom smart contracts on the Ethereum and Neutron side to ensure like a better UX by making sure that you can basically one click into getting the final denomination on the Neutron network and then bridge into anywhere else over IBC. But the more, maybe not end game, but like what we're moving forward with is a solution that I think fits the picture of like sovereign DAOs a lot more. E.g., you have all of these kind of like internet native entities in Ethereum, like Lido is a good example of that, right? It's a DAO. It's kind of like an entity that issues tokens that represent like staked assets. But really, like any like DeFi DAO or any other kind of like even blockchains, right, are sort of like somewhat sovereign like communities that have their own kind of like assets, right? And so the kind of like current status quo is that to reach new networks, like these entities basically give up sovereignty over like control or sovereignty over these assets to the bridge providers, and that's great because now you can expand your assets reach and distribute it. But the issue then becomes that you accumulate technical debt. They basically get vendor lock-in, whereby if you want to migrate liquidity to another provider, that's not an option anymore because you would have to like deploy swap contracts. And there's basically, once that happens, it locks in kind of like the trajectory for the future, and your DAO basically loses a lot of control. So one is like the reason that like that's kind of like the reason why we built this solution for Lido, and the way it's going to work and the way it's going to solve the problem is basically instead of relying on the bridge on the bridge denominations themselves. What it does is that it doesn't actually bridge tokens via Axelar or Wormhole. It bridges data that gets aggregated on both sides, similar to how a multisig would work, except instead of having, like people in the multisig, you have bridges themselves, right? And when a bridge like conveys the authentication data, you can consider this as like their signature in the multi-signature, right? And so as long as, like a number of bridge out of the entire like multi-sig of bridges are secure and not hacked at the same time, then the bridge is secure, right? What that means is that even if one bridge stops working or gets exploited, it doesn't really have the ability to do anything harmful to the user or their funds. The other very nice property of this is that now kind of like the thing that holds for example, 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵 in this case on Ethereum is a contract that is not part of the bridge itself. It's a separate contract that can like serves as the input into the bridge, right? It translates the token deposit into some data. And so that contract here, we can give the ownership of that contract to the DAO that issues the token, right? So in this case, Lido. So Lido would be able to control this part of the bridge. Once we release this like bridge aggregation solution, they'll also be able to route governance messages over this solution, meaning that it can also own the output contract on the other side, right? And at this point, basically what you've done is you've created a bridge infrastructure that relies on like very advanced technologies that Axelar and Wormhole and others are putting out, but does not like depend vitally on them, right? It's resistant to the failure or compromise of any of these solutions, and it retain the sovereignty of like the token issuer, essentially, because the token issuer can own what mints and locks the tokens on both sides, basically. And that solution can basically be generalized to enable any DAO basically to decide to mint and bring their assets cross-chain over Neutron, Axelar, and all of these things, basically.
Got it. The sovereignness of these app chains is another thing that is fascinating to me, because like we saw like the explosion of L1s. Those started to build out sovereign communities. Now L2s seem to be a little bit less sovereign in terms of their dependency on Ethereum for consensus. And now we're seeing like so many unique solutions of trade-offs that people are designing, where some of them are relying on shared sequencers, they're relying on certain technologies, and they're doing that by choice to trade off certain value, whether or not it's true to their focus. And I think it's fascinating to see like, and even the analogy that you brought up about Ethereum as like the biggest app chain, I think is something to think about, like with the sovereignty of Ethereum, because it still relies on.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think you're making a super interesting point, right? Like, I mean, Ethereum is not the largest app chain; it's the largest Cosmos chain, which is like slightly different because Ethereum is not an app chain, right? It's like Ethereum's kind of like core value proposition is like this reliable, credibly neutral, decentralized base layer that, you know, like whatever happens, you can rely on it to stay very similar to what it is today, right? Like maybe not exactly the same. Like we've seen stuff like the merge that altered kind of like the properties of the layer, like fairly fundamentally, but still, like from a developer's perspective, you're building on solid ground, kind of. So that's the core value proposition. Now there's kind of like the other end of the spectrum is like Cosmos chains, whereby, you know, the blockchain itself, the idea is like, right, the upstream thesis is, oh, you can customize the blockchain itself to serve the application, right? And I think like that's a super powerful thesis that hasn't really fully played out. Like we've seen innovation in, you know, using the base layer to build better applications, but I don't think we've seen like nearly the extent of it, right? I think projects like 𝗬𝗿𝗍𝗍 are probably going to sort of like push this forward, because like they've been innovating a lot with, you know, putting the order book in, like in the validator's memory and such. So like there's a bunch of like innovations that are happening, but I think we can still like go further. But I think like this very fundamentally is like probably the most interesting feature of Neutron and Cosmos when with regards to Ethereum, right? It's like where the differentiation is. If you look at Neutron, basically, like if you go on Ethereum, what you get is liquidity, network effects, right? Very important. And then you get composability, right? You synchronous composability. You can launch an application that like application can integrate very closely with other applications on the network. What we're trying to do with Neutron is basically provide you something that Ethereum will never want to do and never be able to provide you, which is like access to, you know, the blockchain itself, basically providing services to you. E.g., when you deploy on Neutron, you get synchronous composability. It's also a smart contract platform, so you can also integrate with other applications. But you also get cross-chain interoperability, right? The blockchain provides you the infrastructure that you need to connect with, you know, 60 plus blockchains today over IBC, own accounts on them, execute transactions remotely, query their state remotely as well, so that you can build a protocol that requires being deployed only once, but can actually extend and exist across, you know, like 60 plus different blockchains. And the third thing you get is access to like application specific infrastructure. E.g., the blockchain itself is designed to expose functions that allow you to build better applications, basically. That includes like being able to shape the liquidity and market structure itself via something that like duality, which is kind of like like a very fascinating project and a great team that was basically building like probably one of the most advanced DEX systems in the industry, and building it as a separate app chain, as a sovereign app chain. And then there was this proposal recently for Neutron and Duality to merge, and that proposal was approved. And so like Neutron is kind of like undergoing the first blockchain merger, to my knowledge, right now, with the, you know, the upgrade being slated next month. And what it will allow is like developers to basically shape the market itself. E.g., like how do I want to structure the liquidity for this asset? Do I want to aggregate multiple types of like curves? Do I want to basically, you know, have triggers that allow me to rebalance the liquidity, so like automatically and trustlessly without having to rely on external keepers? So that's one. And then there's other features like the ability to shape Neutron's block production process itself, right? Like Neutron is launching with is releasing a new upgrade with the block SDK, which is so like a technology that allows you to basically enable applications to have an impact on how the blocks are created, so that they can recapture their MEV and redistribute it to various stakeholders in their protocol, so that they can have dedicated lanes in that block space to ensure that, for example, like Oracle updates are executed at the top of the blocks to avoid Oracle manipulations and such, and or that liquidations are executed at the top of the blocks as well. Same thing to protect applications from bad debt. And all of these things, basically, like I'll spare you the whole list of feature. I think like those two are like two of the ones that I'm personally the most interested in. But the point being that what we're trying to do at Neutron is basically allow you to deploy one set of smart contract that can allow you to build that can leverage Neutron, like the infrastructure, the services the blockchain itself provides you with, to build better applications than you would be able to do, like more ambitious applications that you would be able to do in Ethereum, and to onboard like users from anywhere, to connect to every other domain, right, including Ethereum. And so in that regard, I think it's kind of like how Cosmos and Ethereum are complementary in a way, right? Like Ethereum is likely going to remain this like very stable, kind of like huge network that's kind of like in the middle of the industry. And then other more flexible networks like Neutron and the app chains in Cosmos basically will serve as like connective tissue between applications that are making like different design choices that the trade-offs on the design trade-offs on Ethereum would not allow to build, basically. I think you're muted.
I was deep in the loop of interop, and I was saying I think it's incredibly powerful to bring in account abstraction here, because by combining account abstraction with this powerful interoperability, we achieve almost this golden goose, like this solution that finally puts I almost don't want to make it too simple, but like a Web 2 front end operating on a Web 3 network. And I think that is incredibly powerful, because everyday users, the normies, like, Bitcoin pumped 16% or whatever it was the other day. Like, those are people that are not around right now, but to reach the millions and the billions of people in the world, those are the people that have to understand and use the technology. And I think they aren't particularly hung up on using a blockchain or not. It's a matter of the value that such an app provides them. So by incorporating blockchains underneath the hood, you have this interoperability. You can layer on account abstraction, and I think finally provide a user experience that
I think the point you're making on account abstraction is like super interesting, because like as you said, I think like the combination of account abstraction and cross-chain interoperability is really what allows you to eventually get to this experience where, with wherever your funds are, like whichever wallet you're using, you can access this application in just a few seconds. Your whatever funds you have will be in that application, and you'll be able to use it, sign with the current wallet that you have. You don't have to like pay bridge fees. You don't have to wait for like 20 minutes. You don't have to install a new wallet, create a new seed, all of this. And I think like you're right. This is the sort of like UX, whereby you're not thinking about like a chain anymore, really. You're thinking about like, what application do I want to use? Because like, what do I want to do? And who's going to allow me to do this like best and like fastest and with the better user experience, extra, right? And so I think like that's exactly the direction that we're trying to go towards, basically, like completely abstracting away the infrastructure layer, the blockchain itself, and making sure that the applications themselves are as powerful, as attractive, as easy to onboard to as possible, basically.
Amazing. I realize we're a bit short on time today, so I don't want to keep you, but in kind of like these closing moments, is there anything else that you'd like to share? I think I have so many more questions, so I hope we do get a chance to chat again and talk about CosmWasm and the merge of the blockchain. So in these last few moments for this session, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the Rollup audience?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you talked a lot about like modularity, which is also like a huge and fascinating topic. It's one that we're very close with. I think like there's one big event that's happening in the modularity, like the modular kind of like segment, which is like the upcoming launch of Celestia. One thing that we're like very actively working on is like Celestia has this like interesting combinations of like layers, whereby it has a base layer, but it doesn't have execution on the base layer itself. And so as a result of this, you're not able to have two-way bridges between the Celestia base layer and the rollups on top of it. And you need to, so like at least in the short, medium term, like in the next few years, probably, you'll need to rely on like third-party bridges. And so like we think that Neutron is like a really good place for this because one, you have a very, very good like solid, secure kind of like bridging mechanism between Celestia and Neutron, 𝗵𝗶𝗴𝗵, right, which is probably the safest kind of like bridging mechanism out there currently. And then Neutron itself is also like secured by the entire kind of like stake of the Cosmos Hub, which is one of the largest chains in the industry, and a fairly like neutral place as well. And so basically what we're building right now is a technology that will allow you to go from your Celestia wallet to whatever rollup that you want to be interacting with, like whether that's 𝗵𝗶, eclipse, or any of the others, like in very few clicks, and to do so securely over IBC and Hyperlane, basically. So that's something that I find like super exciting. Basically, we're happy to be like a big part of Celestia's kind of like early ecosystem, and just like I think we'll be announcing some of that work like in the next few days, but you get to hear it first, I guess.
Alpha drop right here. Welcome to the bull market. 𝗵𝗲, thank you so much for coming on, man. This is so much fun, and like I said, I really do hope we get a chance to chat again.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I'm happy to make myself available, so anytime, just hit me up.
Sweet.
Thanks for having me.
Great.
Cheers.